Welcome back. It's now 24 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is Morning Express. It's time for us to look at what's making headlines on the dailies. And I'd like to start by introducing the panel that we have here this morning, which will also look at the way it is later on as we carry on. And I'll start with my extreme left, where we have Honorable Senator Irungu Kangata, Senator from Murang'a County. He's also the Deputy Chief Whip in the Senate. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have Michael Agwanda, who's a governance consultant. And last but not least, Ambrose Weda, who is an advocate. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning as we look at what's happening in the country. But let's start off with the dailies. And the standard this morning is, well, the headlines is Raila calls ODM crisis talks over the handshake. And this is, I mean, partly also a story that is making headlines on the nation. Ruto allies, Raila is a nobody in Jubilee. But let's start with the standard. And Raila calls ODM crisis over the handshake. Let me start with you, Ambrose, on your thoughts on whether the handshake seems to have destabilized, one, NASA as a coalition, but also ODM Party's internal organs.
I think the handshake, first of all, shocked Honorable Atangula and Honorable Kalonzo because it throwing down just. Also, for those who have been salivating for a few things in Jubilee, those who have been dealing with the government issues at night, and then during the day they condemn President Uhuru and Ruto and the likes of Weda. The handshake opened the floodgates. It is now very good to be associated both sides. Now, those who had their links in government or in Jubilee now have a higher stake, not a stake, they have a higher position than the others. So the others who have been cantankerous against the president, abusive and rough and rude against people like Weda, now they feel very far because they still don't have links. So it has destabilized the terrain, and some people feel very bad when they see their colleagues are already reaping the benefits of the handshake. So I think these are the fallout that Honorable Raila wants to bring in.
To contain.
And then he also doesn't want to lose troops to Jubilee. Because some of them, when they lick the sugar, they'll just come and put their heads and forget about ODM. So it is a balancing act. That, I think, is where they are.
All right, Mr. Gwanda, do you foresee any possible road bumps ahead, especially given, I think, one of the things that may have made it a challenge is the fact that the handshake was shrouded in mystery. Not very many people within the party were aware of what the handshake, what were the confines, what was the framework of the handshake?
True. Where we are now, we are in a situation basically where the ODM fraternity and NASA is still not very sure what the handshake really means. And so what is happening is members of parliament seem to be taking it upon themselves to reach out to the government that out of the handshake goodwill. Basically, there are no rules. The NASA fraternity, those are the members of parliament and the Senate, have not been put to a place where they can say, this is our framework of engaging with the government, and this is how far we can go. As it is, everybody's guessing, if I did this, will it be okay with the party leaders or not? If I did this, will it rub the party leaders in the wrong side of the shoulder or not? And so I think we are in a place where basically, unless the party leaders, the NASA leaders come out very strongly and say, these are the framework of our engagement with the government, we will still see all this manner of jumping here and there. As we can see, most of it is actually coming from Mombasa, and Mombasa has actually been very, very volatile to the Jubilee administration until now, and they've been very favorable to Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. As you can see, these MPs, what I will tell you for free, is some of them are also very broke. They are trying to look for something to engage themselves with. And the only way they can do this is to become closer with the Deputy President, and see whether they can have a political pact. Whether this is going to be sustained until 2022, God knows, because it might not be sustained until 2022. Again, when you look at the party issues and principles and rules and regulations in terms of engaging within your own party as it is enshrined in the Constitution, then you'll be left to wonder whether they will be able to engage without necessarily getting an instruction from the political parties they come from in terms of leadership. If that happens, then it is very easy, as some people had started saying, that, you know, you could be de-whipped from the committees in parliament and many other lucrative positions that you might be having as a member of a specific party. Before that, I think we'll wait and see, because
Irungu Kenyatta, this must be good news for Jubilee. Looking from across the board and seeing that it looks like it has unsettled ODM, which has been a very vocal opponent or opposition to Jubilee.
It appears Raila went into the so-called handshake with some funny agenda, because I do not understand why he appears fidgety, because when he talks of cooperation, he is not only talking of cooperation between him and Uhuru Kenyatta, but it's a cooperation between him and everybody else who is in Jubilee. So when you see Deputy President associating himself with various members of ODM, I would imagine that is part of the handshake. And when so it appears he had a hidden agenda. Most likely he wanted to derail the ambitions of His Excellency, the Deputy President William Ruto. But now, surely, I don't, unless you unravel the entire handshake, which appears it is not his intention, he has to accommodate William Ruto, even when some members of his party decide to embrace Mr. William Ruto.
So would
in any event, by the way, it is on record. He has said he will not vie in 2022 unless he wants to backtrack on that. So therefore, if some of his party members, I think William Ruto is a very bright politician. When handshake came, he took advantage of it. It gave him a window to penetrate into areas which were hit hard or very negative against our party. So, and therefore, if you are meeting to then tell your members, don't associate with this person, that will be, you are blowing hot and cold. Because you told us cooperate with Jubilee, you never said don't cooperate with this person in Jubilee. It's everyone in Jubilee that you must cooperate. And through that, we got an opportunity to go into his territory.
Whether you wanted to respond
What I
to
want to add, the jitters, especially in lowland, is most of the elected leaders are sitting on edge. There are people who went in because they have the ODM ticket and they paint others black. Either you are with Uhuru, you are dark, you are what. Now that there's a handshake and people think that Uhuru and Raila are one and the same thing, some of those leaders know very well that they're on their way out. And the jitters increases. They'd rather the handshake ends so that they continue. You grab the ticket, you say, we are going to help Jacom up there, and then you are elected. But if it remains the way it is and people go for the next elections,
there may be no room for them.
Some of them are out. They are in the streets so far, and they know it.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Konda.
Yeah, on the other hand, I really don't think that the jittery is a genuine one. I think if you look at this handshake, it's between Uhuru Kenyatta and Honorable Raila Odinga. In my view, including the Deputy President and his trips, whatever he's doing into this fiasco, is just a point to derail the entire handshake, in my view. I really think that whatever the Deputy President is doing, he's doing on behalf of the President in this country. And therefore, what Raila is also doing in terms of rallying his people behind him and members of parliament is what you'll expect from every political leader in this country, including Jubilee. There are many cases where Jubilee, President Uhuru has called Jubilee elected leaders and talked to them. And so when Honorable Raila is going to talk to his NASA counterparts or ODM leaders, it really, I don't know why we are reading a sinister move in it, yet it is by the mandates of his leadership of the ODM, he has a right to do that, in my view.
Maybe the reason why there are those undertones is the statements that are made in political rallies, one of those being, of course, Raila himself coming out to say that the Deputy President should stop kurandaranda, using the infamous words used by the President. And maybe Rungu Kenyatta, Senator, to bring you in on this, that kurandaranda business, according to William Ruto, he is merely just, going about making sure that the Jubilee agenda is followed through? But according to some, it looks like he's already trying to garner momentum for 2022, which again, for a politician, really, it's expected. But isn't this too early to be campaigning?
No, what Ruto is doing is exactly what he was doing between 2013 and 2017. If at all that time it was not a mistake, why is it that now it is a major issue? And therefore, I don't see any problem with Ruto going around and talking to people. That is his personal right. That's number one. Number two, I think also Mr. Raila Odinga himself is also guilty of kurandaranda. We always see him, I don't know, in Luo Nyanza, we see him in Coast, he's now in Coast. So therefore,
the pot calling the knee black.
Yes, indeed. So to that extent, I think it's unfair for him to tell William Ruto don't randa. In any event, Article 38 of the Constitution is quite right. Everyone has certain political rights. You have the right of expression, right to mobilize people. So William Ruto has that right to proceed and continue talking to people, which to me is within his political.
All right, let's look at something else in the dailies. We'll come back to matters political and I'll guide you on what we're going to be looking at. But on page 4 of the Standard, we also have legal lacuna robs Kenyans of billions in digital wealth. And maybe whether it might be good to hear from you, there's a lacuna, legally speaking, on digital wealth. An example would be mobile money. In case of death, there's a lot of money suspended that either people have not come to claim, and it just remains there. It's not known how this money is going to be distributed and how anyone can access it, even the next of kin. So a legal lacuna there, and anomalies, imbalance between men and women when it comes to owning property. There's a lack of laws in interest and digital assets. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we have a law dealing with unclaimed assets. The only part that has not been dealt with is a lot of digital money are in small quantities. I myself, I know I have a line which remained with about 800 shillings, another one 1,200. So going to claim at individual level, the amounts are very little. But cumulatively for people in this country is billions. There are people who die, other people cannot access their PIN numbers. They don't even know, so they just take the land or they forget them. But inside there is money. I think the lacuna here is how collectively the money can be applied. Individually, you can't go and collect 40 shillings, which remained, or 10 shillings, or 5 shillings, and so. And you'll find that Safaricom or Celtel or those people, they put so many roadblocks when you want to claim your 20 bob. So many that you say, wachana nayo. But cumulatively, it is billions. So the law has not been enacted to deal with these small amounts that accumulate into billions.
Can I interject?
They're supposed to be lumped as unclaimed assets. But its application has not been done because it's like the owners are supposed to go and collect them.
Okay.
Can I interject? I think the question that you have raised, I think, is an issue of what we call digital assets. And I tend probably to disagree. I think what you are answering is not per se what I was asking. Yes, I say that because you're asking issues surrounding what we call digital assets like bitcoins. Yeah, because now, if you say like bitcoins, is it an asset that can fall under the law of succession? Is it an asset that is recognized by law? You may have other, let's say, some assets that are stored, let's say, in, you call it a cloud facility, isn't
Correct.
it? You may even have other assets, let's say, in Yahoo.
Which ones are these assets?
Coins, for instance, and bitcoins. Yes, they are there. In fact, one Bitcoin currently is trading at about 700,000, isn't it? It is a digital currency where you buy into it, you can now purchase things using it. It's not recognized in law in Kenya. In fact, there is already a pronouncement by the CBK that Kenya does not recognize the bitcoins. But be that as it
or cryptocurrency for that matter.
Yes, indeed. But be that as it may, it is something that exists. It is something that is tradable currently online.
Well, those are the ones you are referring to.
No, there's those, but there's also the amount, what you're talking about, the
I'm
money
talking
that
about
is
Kenya.
hanging.
You are talking about cloud.
No, ask him. Yes, he's asking that.
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes.
Well, what was the gist of your question? Maybe you can read.
and
You
no,
can read the story
Money.
again.
I think you're both right.
Can you
Let me
repeat it?
contribute on
Actually,
this.
yes, just to settle it,
Yeah.
you're both right in
Yeah.
that there is the digital currency and digital wealth,
Exactly.
which exists. And the thing with digital wealth, it is not bound to a border. You can own it and it's wherever, it's in the
is
cloud.
transnational.
But it is recognized in certain countries as currency, which is why it's called cryptocurrency. But at the same time, we also have, like now, mobile money. That was just an example.
I
It's
had
money
read
which
the
is suspended, but legally, nobody knows how to access that money and who owns that money. But you wanted to say something, Mr. Kwan.
What I want to say is both gentlemen are right. There's no competition on it. He's talking about the M-Pesa thing that is known to all of us. He's talking about cryptocurrency, and I will talk about the iTunes, for example. I mean, these things are not only limited to Kenyan market. They're in international market. Now people producing music and putting them on iTunes. And once they put them on iTunes, they have a value and they have a contract. And when people buy them from iTunes, that money is directed and channeled to those artists. When they die, the relatives have no way to access the resources. And these are the digital assets that we are talking about. Now, you can do that, but I can tell you it is a protracted legal battle because you are actually looking at cross-border. Most of those things are either hosted in Europe or in America. And for that reason, when I go to WEDA to help me get my money from iTunes, it's going to have to consult somebody in America to be able to litigate on that. But the truth of the matter is Kenya do not have the legal basis to start working on the issues of iTunes and how to repatriate that money back into this country. Because these are new, form of currencies,
digital currency,
that are people are having out there, and they're not disclosing to their families in some cases. And so when you die, you just lose it. And forget about the ones that are here in Kenya, which we're talking about 500 million plus, that is unclaimed. We're talking about billions. In fact, the estimation in that write-up is about 99 billion that is just out there that Kenyans are owning, and their relatives perhaps are not able to touch when something happens to them. The truth of the matter is the legislators and the members of parliament and the senates really need to start looking at digital asset in this country and bring laws that goes across the border and also to help people to get the little money that is left there. I agree with Mr. Weda. I think the main reason why people do not claim some of these assets is they look little, like 400 shillings, 500 shillings. I mean,
but
we are a country of 45 million plus people. If everybody, or say a quarter of it, is being owned 1,000 or 2,000 and they never claim it, that's a ton of money. And so when we look at that big money, there must be some legislative enactment to help ease the settlement of this money so that if it's just money that is left on the M-Pesa and somebody has passed on, you can prove that he's passed on, his spouse can come for that money without legal jargons to help clear some of these things.
All right.
Let me just clarify something.
Very briefly.
Please, intellectual property is protected properly, both locally and at international, both with conventions and laws. So things like iTunes, you're saying you put it there, those are well protected. Let no viewer imagine that there's a legal lacuna there. There's none.
No, the issue is how to claim it.
Now,
It's
if
protected,
you
but how
keep
do you
certain
claim it?
secrets, even land, if you buy land in Dandora and you keep it secret and you die, that one will go. There are certain things people must learn to either write down their wills or document things so that when you die, your family knows that go into that file, you read things. But if you keep them secret, they remain billions, but nobody
All right.
will.
And
But
at
Mr.
this
Weda,
point,
this one minute, Mr. Weda, this case is coming out because a magistrate is saying there is no law to back it up. That's the genesis of this.
Forget about what the magistrate said.
And again, by the way,
know the law.
some of these platforms appears to have been foreclosed by some of the regulations you find in those platforms. I think one, for instance, if I'm not wrong, has clearly said once you die, it cannot devolve your asset to your dependent, which is illegal in Kenyan law. So that's something that needs to,
all right,
to be
and I
addressed.
guess at this point it might be good for you to get yourself a copy of the Standard and just read through what some of those assets are and articles. You just might be a billionaire and you didn't know. But let's look at something else here, and we've already alluded to the headline of the Daily Nation. Ruto allies Raila is a nobody in Jubilee, but we'll come back to that. But maybe, gentlemen, because we are almost out of time to look at the dailies, how so far World Cup is treating you? I don't know whether you've had any upsets, any surprises. Let me start with you, Mr. Agwanda. Are you a World Cup fan? Are you following football, or that's not your forte?
That's not my strength, but I yesterday watched Germany and Mexico, and that was a thrilling match. I know Germany lost one to, Mexico, but I see those two teams. One of them might just win the World Cup. I mean, it's just amazing.
And Germany is the defending champ. So
yeah, and when you look
right
at the way they were playing, I mean, Germany lost so many chances, to say the truth. I mean, they were almost equal partners, but you could see that Germany lost so many chances, and so losing just one, the opening match might not be a determinant factor for them
for them.
win.
Whether anybody you're supporting, very briefly?
Did you know today the World Health Organization declared that some of these attachments is a disease? Watching things, TV, whatever. I have nobody. Anybody who wins, we will salute
It's fine.
Yeah.
Irungu, anything you're supporting in the World Cup?
Yes, also I share
That sentiment. So whoever wins, wins.
But if Kenya was there,
you would definitely be
we
behind
would be
Kenya.
cheering and praying every day and fasting for them.
All right, I think for now we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back when we want to look at the political point. And what we'd like to concentrate on is also the position of the opposition. Remember, we have ODM, going for a retreat or something that's going to be led by the opposition leader Raila Odinga, and part of from the inside sources, what they might be discussing is how to deal with some of those who are already throwing their weight behind the Deputy President William Ruto. But also there's a question of where is the opposition, and do we still have a strong opposition in this country? For now, we take a short break. We'll be right back.
This is KTN News.